The blood on her hands had frozen solid by the time she realized her uncle was not coming back. 20-year-old Temperance Lawson pressed herself tighter against the rough bark of the pine tree, her thin traveling coat doing nothing against the howling Montana wind that screamed through the forest like a living thing. The snow had started 3 hours ago as gentle flakes, but now it came down in thick, angry sheets that erased the trail her uncle's wagon had taken when he told her to wait while he scouted ahead. She had believed him because she had no choice, because after her parents died of scarlet fever in Denver, Uncle Marcus was all she had left in this world. But the sun was setting now. What little light could penetrate the storm was fading fast, and the terrible truth settled in her chest like a stone. He had abandoned her here to die. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago. She could not feel her toes anymore, and the shivering that had racked her body earlier had slowed to an occasional tremor that she dimly understood was worse than the shaking. Temperance had always been a practical girl, the type who could stitch a wound or balance accounts or fire her father's old rifle when necessary. But none of that helped her now. She was going to freeze to death in these woods, and no one would find her body until spring thawed the snow. Her uncle would tell people she had wandered off, that he had searched for days but could not find her. He would collect whatever inheritance her parents had left, the small house in Denver and her mother's jewelry, and no one would question his story. The wind shifted, and through the howling she heard something else. Hoofbeats, heavy and determined, moving through the storm with purpose. Temperance tried to call out, but her jaw was too stiff with cold, and what came out was barely a whisper. She attempted to stand, to wave her arms, but her legs would not cooperate. Her body felt like it belonged to someone else, like she was watching from a great distance as this foolish girl curled tighter under the tree, her dark hair matted with snow, her lips blue, her eyes struggling to stay open. The hoofbeats came closer. Through the white curtain of snow, she saw a shape materialize, a massive horse with a rider hunched against the storm. The horse was dark, maybe black or deep brown, and the rider wore a heavy coat and a hat pulled low. Temperance tried again to make a sound, and this time something between a croak and a moan escaped her throat. The rider's head snapped in her direction. Within seconds, the horse was beside her tree, and the man was dismounting in one fluid motion. He was tall. She could see that much, with broad shoulders and quick movements despite the storm. He knelt beside her, and she saw his face, weathered and stern, with dark eyes that widened when he saw her condition. "Jesus Christ," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "How long have you been out here?" Temperance tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering too hard. The man did not wait for a response. He shrugged out of his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around her, then scooped her up like she weighed nothing at all. She wanted to protest, to tell him she could walk, but they both would have known it for a lie. He settled her in front of him on the saddle, keeping one arm locked around her waist, while the other hand took up the reins. "My cabin is a mile east," he said, more to himself than to her. "You hold on now. Stay awake if you can." The ride was a blur of white and cold, and the solid warmth of the man's chest against her back. Temperance drifted in and out, her mind playing tricks on her. She thought she saw her mother standing in the snow, waving. She thought she heard her father calling her name. Then there was firelight and blessed heat, and strong hands lowering her onto something soft. "Got to get you warm," the man was saying. "But not too fast, or it will hurt worse." He was right. As feelings started to return to her extremities, the pain was excruciating. Temperance gasped and then cried out, tears streaming down her face. The man worked efficiently, removing her wet boots and stockings, wrapping her feet in warm cloths. He brought blankets and piled them over her, then held a cup of something hot to her lips. "Drink," he commanded. "Just broth. It will help." Temperance drank, even though her throat protested. The warmth spread through her chest, and slowly, so slowly, the pain in her hands and feet began to subside into something bearable. She could see the cabin properly now, small but well built, with a stone fireplace that currently blazed with heat. There was a table, two chairs, a trunk, and the bed she was lying on. Simple furnishings for a simple life. The man pulled one of the chairs close to the bed and sat down, studying her with those dark eyes. He looked to be in his late 20s, with black hair that was overlong and a jaw shadowed with stubble. There was a hardness to him, the look of someone who had seen difficult things and survived them. "Name's Nathan Cooper," he said. "I work cattle for the Morrison Ranch, about 5 miles south of here." "What were you doing out in that storm?" Temperance's voice came out as a rasp. "My uncle, he left me." Nathan's expression darkened. "Left you? On purpose?" She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. Now that she was safe, now that death was not breathing down her neck, the full weight of the betrayal crashed over her. "He said he was going to scout ahead, told me to wait by the tree. But he never came back. I waited for hours." "What's your name?" Nathan asked, his voice gentler now. "Temperance Lawson. My parents died 3 months ago in Denver. Uncle Marcus was taking me to Butte. He said I could live with him and his wife, help with their store. But I heard him talking to someone at the last town. He was complaining about having to take me in, about how I was a burden. I should have known. I should have seen it coming." Nathan stood abruptly and walked to the fireplace, bracing his hands against the mantel. The muscles in his shoulders were tense beneath his flannel shirt. "A man who would leave a woman in a snowstorm is no man at all. You are sure he was not hurt? That something did not happen to him?" "His wagon tracks went back the way we came," Temperance said quietly. "I saw them before the snow covered everything." Nathan turned back to her, his jaw set. "Then he is a coward and worse. You will stay here tonight, get your strength back. In the morning, if the storm has passed, I will take you into Butte. You can report what happened to the sheriff." "I have no money," Temperance said, hating how weak she sounded. "Nothing but what I am wearing. My trunk was in his wagon." "We will figure it out," Nathan said firmly. "For now, you need to rest. I will take the floor by the fire." "I cannot ask you to do that. This is your home." "You did not ask. I am offering." He pulled a bedroll from the trunk and spread it on the floor. "Sleep, Temperance Lawson. You are safe now." She wanted to argue more, but exhaustion pulled at her like a riptide. Her eyes closed almost against her will, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When Temperance woke, pale morning light was filtering through the cabin's single window. The storm had passed, and the world outside was blanketed in white. Nathan was at the stove, and the smell of coffee and bacon filled the small space. He glanced over when he heard her stir. "How are you feeling?" Temperance took stock of herself. Her hands and feet were sore, and she felt weak, but the desperate cold was gone. "Better." "Sore, but better." "Good. I made breakfast. You should eat before we head out." She sat up slowly, keeping the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Nathan brought her a plate with bacon, cornbread, and eggs. She ate ravenously, not caring about manners. He refilled her plate twice without comment. After they had eaten and cleaned up, Nathan saddled his horse, a sturdy roan gelding named Red. He helped Temperance up first, then swung up behind her. The ride to Butte took almost 2 hours through the snow-choked trails. Nathan kept his arm around her waist, steadying her when the horse had to navigate difficult terrain. Butte was a mining town, rough and rowdy, perched in the mountains with an air of barely controlled chaos. The streets were mud and slush, and even at mid-morning, Temperance could hear piano music and shouting from the saloons. Nathan guided Red through the main street to a small building with a star nailed to the door. Sheriff Tom Bridger was a middle-aged man with a gray mustache and tired eyes. He listened to Temperance's story with increasing anger, making notes in a ledger. "Marcus Lawson, you said? Runs a general store?" "That is what he told me," Temperance said. "On 3rd Street. The sheriff nodded grimly. "I know the place. I will pay him a visit. What he did is criminal, leaving you like that." could be charged with attempted murder. I do not care about charges, Temperance said, surprised by the venom in her own voice. I just want people to know what kind of man he is. They will, the sheriff promised. Where are you staying? I will need to speak with you again. Temperance opened her mouth but had no answer. Nathan spoke up before she could flounder. She is staying at the boarding house on 5th, Mrs. Callahan's place. The sheriff nodded, satisfied, and Nathan ushered Temperance back outside before she could protest. I told you I have no money, she said once they were on the street. I cannot afford a boarding house. Mrs. Callahan is a friend, Nathan said. She will give you a room on credit until you can find work. Butte is not a gentle town, but there are good people here. You will not starve, and you will not be on the street. Temperance felt tears prick her eyes again. This stranger, this cowboy, who had found her half dead under a tree, was showing her more kindness than her own blood. Why are you helping me? Nathan looked uncomfortable, like the question pained him. Because it is the right thing to do. Because I know what it is like to have nowhere to go. Come on, let me introduce you to Mrs. Callahan. The boarding house was a 2-story structure that had seen better days, but was clean and well kept. Mrs. Callahan herself was a stout woman in her 50s, with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense manner. Nathan explained the situation in brief, careful terms, and Mrs. Callahan's expression softened. Poor lamb, she said, taking Temperance's hand. You come with me. I have a room on the 2nd floor, nice and quiet. You can work off your rent helping with cooking and cleaning until you find something more permanent. I can do that, Temperance said quickly. I am a good worker, I promise. I am sure you are. Mrs. Callahan patted her hand. Now let me show you to your room. You look like you could use a hot bath and some proper rest. Temperance followed her inside, but paused at the doorway to look back at Nathan. He was standing beside his horse, looking uncertain, like he was not sure if he should leave or stay. Thank you, Temperance said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. You saved my life. Nathan ducked his head, pulling his hat low. Just happened to be riding in the right place. You take care of yourself, Temperance. He mounted Red and rode away before she could say anything else. Temperance watched him go, feeling an odd pang in her chest. She told herself it was just gratitude, just relief at being alive, but there was something else there too, something she could not quite name. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Temperance worked hard at the boarding house, helping Mrs. Callahan with meals, laundry, and cleaning. Her hands, which had been soft from her city life in Denver, grew calloused and capable. The other boarders were mostly miners and railroad workers, rough men who kept to themselves, but were polite enough. Mrs. Callahan ran a respectable establishment and would not tolerate any nonsense. A week after her arrival, Sheriff Bridger came by with news. Marcus Lawson had denied everything, claimed Temperance had run away, and that he had searched for her, but could not find her in the storm. His wife backed up his story. Without witnesses or proof, there was not much the sheriff could do. But I made it clear what I think of him, the sheriff said grimly, and I let it slip in the saloon what happened. Word spreads fast in a town like this. His reputation is mud now. People will know what he did. It was small comfort, but it was something. Temperance thanked the sheriff and went back to work. She tried not to think about Nathan, but it was difficult. She found herself looking for him on the street, hoping he might come by the boarding house, but he never did. She told herself it was better that way. He had his life, and she had to build hers. 2 weeks after Nathan had rescued her, Temperance was at the general store buying supplies for Mrs. Callahan when she saw him. Not Nathan, but her uncle. Marcus was behind the counter, helping a customer, his face set in a pleasant smile that made her stomach turn. His wife, Aunt Clara, was arranging canned goods on a shelf. Marcus looked up and saw her. For just a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw fear and guilt flash across his face. Then the pleasant smile was back, but his eyes were cold. "Temperance," he said carefully. I heard you were in town. Thank God you are safe. I searched for you for hours that day, but the storm was so bad and I could not find you. I thought you had perished. Liar, the word burned on her tongue, but the other customers in the store were watching with interest. Temperance drew herself up, channeling every ounce of her mother's dignity. You are a liar and a coward, Marcus Lawson. You left me to die, and you know it. I will not make a scene in your store, but I want you to know that I see you for what you are. You are not worth my anger or my time. She turned on her heel and walked out, her heart pounding. Behind her, she could hear the murmur of voices, the speculation starting. Good. Let them talk. She was halfway back to the boarding house when she heard hoofbeats behind her. She turned to see Nathan on red, pulling up beside her. Heard you had words with your uncle at the store, he said without preamble. News travels fast, Temperance said dryly. In a mining town? Always. Nathan dismounted and walked beside her, leading Red. You did the right thing. Standing up to him. I do not feel righteous. I feel angry. Anger is better than fear. Shows you are healing. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then added, I have been meaning to come by. Check on you. Work has been busy with the spring thaw coming. The cattle need moving, and there is always something breaking. You do not owe me anything, Nathan. You already saved my life. Maybe I wanted to see you anyway. Temperance stopped walking and looked at him. He met her gaze steadily, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was not just concern or kindness. It was interest, real and unmistakable. I am a mess, she said quietly. I have nothing. No family, no money, no prospects. You have yourself, Nathan said. That is more than nothing. And for what it is worth, I think you are doing just fine. They started walking again, slower now. Tell me about yourself, Temperance said. You know my whole sad story, but I know nothing about you. Nathan was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he began to speak, his voice low. I grew up in Texas, on a ranch outside San Antonio. My father was a hard man, believed in discipline and work above all else. My mother died when I was 12, and after that, my father got worse. He drank, he raged, he took his anger out on me and my younger sister. You have a sister? Had. Sarah died when she was 15. Influenza. After that, I left. Could not stand to be in that house anymore. I drifted for a few years, working ranches across Texas and New Mexico, learning the trade. Ended up here 3 years ago. The Morrison Ranch pays fair, and the work is honest. It is a good life, simple and clean. Do you ever think about going back to Texas? No, there is nothing for me there. My father drank himself to death 2 years ago. A neighbor wrote to tell me. I did not even go to the funeral. Nathan glanced at her. Does that make me a bad person? No, Temperance said firmly. It makes you human. We do not owe loyalty to people who hurt us, even if they are family. They had reached the boarding house. Nathan tied Red to the hitching post and followed her inside. Mrs. Callahan was in the kitchen, up to her elbows in bread dough. She looked up and smiled when she saw Nathan. Nathan Cooper, as I live and breathe. I have not seen you in town in weeks. Have you come for supper? I am making roast chicken tonight. If the offer is open, I would be glad to accept, Nathan said. The offer is always open for you, boy. You know that. Mrs. Callahan's eyes twinkled as she looked between Nathan and Temperance. Why do you not show him the sitting room, Temperance? Supper will not be ready for another hour. The sitting room was small but comfortable, with worn furniture and a stove that kept the space warm. Temperance sat on the settee, and Nathan took the chair across from her. Now that they were alone, the air felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. Can I ask you something? Temperance said. Of course. Why did you really come looking for me today? The truth. Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Because I have not been able to stop thinking about you. I know it has only been 2 weeks, and I know you have been through hell, and the last thing you probably need is some cowboy complicating your life. But I had to see you. I had to know if what I felt when I found you, when I brought you back to my cabin, if it was real or just the circumstances. And Temperance's heart was hammering in her chest. It is real, at least for me. Nathan's dark eyes were intense, searching her face. I am not good with words, Temperance. I am just a ranch hand, and I do not have much to offer. But I would like to court you properly, if you would let me. I would like to see where this goes. Temperance felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. 2 weeks ago, she had been dying in the snow, certain her life was over. Now this man, this good and honest man, was sitting in front of her offering her something she had not dared to hope for. I would like that too, she said softly. But you should know I am damaged goods in the eyes of this town, the girl whose uncle tried to kill her, the girl with nothing. I do not care what this town thinks, and you are not damaged goods. You are a survivor. Nathan stood and crossed to the settee, sitting beside her. He took her hand carefully like it was something precious. We can take this slow. I know you need time, but I want you to know my intentions are honorable. I believe you, Temperance said. And she did. There was something inherently trustworthy about Nathan Cooper, something solid and real that she could hold on to. They sat like that, hands linked, until Mrs. Callahan called them for supper. The meal was lively, with the other boarders telling stories and jokes. Nathan fit in easily, and Temperance found herself laughing for the first time in months. It felt good, like a weight lifting. After supper, Nathan lingered on the porch, reluctant to leave. I will be back in town on Saturday, he said. There is a dance at the church hall. Would you like to go with me? I do not have anything to wear, Temperance said automatically, then felt foolish, but Nathan just smiled. Wear what you have on. You look beautiful just as you are. He tipped his hat and mounted Red, riding off into the twilight. Temperance watched him go, her hand pressed to her chest, where her heart was doing strange, fluttery things. Mrs. Callahan appeared beside her, drying her hands on her apron. That is a good man, that Nathan Cooper. He has had a hard life, but it has not made him bitter. You could do a lot worse. I barely know him, Temperance protested weakly. You know enough. I have seen the way you look at each other. Sometimes you just know, child. Sometimes it is that simple. The week leading up to the dance seemed to crawl by. Temperance threw herself into work, trying not to count the hours. Mrs. Callahan, despite Temperance's protests, altered one of her own dresses for the occasion, a deep blue calico that brought out the color of Temperance's eyes. Saturday arrived clear and cold. Temperance spent extra time on her appearance, brushing her dark hair until it shone and pinning it up carefully. When Nathan arrived to pick her up, dressed in clean clothes with his hair combed back, the look on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman in Montana. The church hall was packed with people, miners and ranchers and townspeople, all eager for entertainment. A fiddle player and a guitarist provided music, and the dancing was lively. Nathan was not an elegant dancer, but he was enthusiastic, and Temperance found herself laughing as he spun her around the floor. During a break in the music, they stepped outside to cool off. The night air was crisp, and the stars were brilliant overhead, unobscured by city lights. I have not had this much fun in years, Nathan admitted. Work does not leave much time for socializing. Tell me about the ranch, Temperance said. What is it like? Nathan leaned against the railing, his face thoughtful. It is hard work, but good work. Mr. Morrison is fair, treats his men well. We run about 500 head of cattle, move them to different pastures with the seasons. Spring is calving time, which means long nights and little sleep. Summer is branding and driving them to high pasture. Fall is roundup, getting them ready for market. Winter is the quiet time, just keeping them fed and safe. It sounds like a good life. It is. It is honest and simple. I like working with my hands, being outside. I like that at the end of the day, I can see what I have accomplished. Nathan glanced at her. What about you? Do you think you will stay in Butte? I do not know, Temperance said honestly. I like working for Mrs. Callahan, but I know it cannot be permanent. I need to think about my future, about what I want to do with my life. You have time to figure it out. You do not have to decide everything today. They talked for a long time about everything and nothing. Temperance found it easy to talk to Nathan, easier than it had ever been with anyone else. He listened when she spoke, really listened, and he did not try to fix everything or offer unwanted advice. He just let her be herself. As the evening wound down, Nathan walked her back to the boarding house. At the door, he hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her cheek softly. Thank you for tonight, he said. It meant a lot to me. To me too, Temperance whispered. She watched him right away, her fingers touching the spot where his lips had been. Mrs. Callahan was right. Sometimes you just knew. The courtship that followed was sweet and slow. Nathan came to town every Saturday, and they would walk together, or attend church, or simply sit on the porch and talk. He was not a man of grand gestures or flowery words, but his actions spoke volumes. He brought her a book of poetry he thought she might like. He fixed the broken step on the boarding house without being asked. He was patient and kind, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. Spring arrived in full force, turning the mountains green and filling the air with the scent of wildflowers. Temperance had been in Butte for 3 months, and her life had settled into something resembling normalcy. She still helped Mrs. Callahan, but she had also taken on sewing work, mending clothes for miners who had no wives to do it for them. It was not much, but it was income, and it gave her a sense of pride. One Saturday in early May, Nathan arrived with a proposition. Mr. Morrison is hosting a picnic for the ranch hands and their families tomorrow, he said. I would like you to come, meet everyone, if you are comfortable with that. Temperance felt a flutter of nervousness. Meeting his friends, his community, felt significant, like a step toward something more permanent, but she nodded. I would like that. The Morrison Ranch was beautiful, sprawling across a valley with the mountains rising behind it. The ranch house was large and well maintained, and behind it were barns, corrals, and bunkhouses. There were about 20 people at the picnic, ranch hands and their wives and children, all friendly and welcoming. Mr. Morrison himself was a tall, weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes. His wife, Eleanor, immediately took Temperance under her wing, introducing her to the other women and making her feel included. Temperance helped set out food, played with the children, and listened to the men tell stories about cattle drives and stubborn bulls. Nathan stayed close to her the whole day, his hand occasionally finding hers, his eyes checking to make sure she was comfortable. She saw how respected he was here, how the other men looked up to him and sought his advice. He belonged here in a way she had never belonged anywhere. As the sun began to set, Nathan led her away from the crowd to a spot overlooking the valley. The land stretched out below them, golden in the evening light, peaceful and eternal. This is where I feel most at home, Nathan said quietly. Out here with the land and the animals. It is where I make sense. I can see that, Temperance said. You fit here. Nathan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I want you to fit here too. I know it has only been 3 months, and maybe it is too soon, but I need to say this. I love you, Temperance Lawson. I think I have loved you since the moment I found you under that tree, so fierce and determined to survive. You are the strongest person I know, and I want to spend my life with you if you will have me. Temperance felt tears spring to her eyes. Nathan, I do not know what to say. This is so fast. I know, and if you need more time, I will give it to you. but I needed you to know how I feel. I needed you to know that I am serious about this, about us. Temperance thought about the past 3 months, about how Nathan had been there for her every step of the way. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how he made her laugh, how he challenged her to be braver and stronger. She thought about the alternative, a life without him, and it felt empty and cold. I love you too, she said, the words coming easier than she expected. I have been afraid to admit it, afraid that it was just gratitude or relief. But it is not. It is real. You are real, and this is real. Nathan's face broke into a smile so wide and genuine that it transformed him. He pulled her close and kissed her, not on the cheek this time, but on the lips, deep and passionate. Temperance melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart soaring. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Will you marry me, Temperance? I do not have much to offer, just a ranch hand's wages and a small cabin, but I will work hard for you. I will give you everything I have. Yes, Temperance said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. They announced their engagement that evening at the picnic, and the celebration was immediate and joyous. Mrs. Morrison hugged Temperance tight and whispered that she was gaining a wonderful man. Mr. Morrison shook Nathan's hand and clapped him on the back, clearly pleased. The ride back to Butte that night was magical. Temperance sat in front of Nathan on red, his arms around her, feeling like she could conquer the world. They made plans as they rode, talking about when they would marry, where they would live, what their future would look like. I want to marry soon, Nathan said. I do not see the point in waiting, unless you want a big wedding. No, Temperance said. Just something simple. Maybe at the church in town, with Mrs. Callahan and the Morrisons as witnesses. That sounds perfect. They settled on a date 3 weeks away, the first Saturday in June. It gave them time to make arrangements, but was not so far off that the anticipation would drive them crazy. When Nathan dropped her off at the boarding house, he kissed her again, long and slow, like he was memorizing the taste of her. 3 weeks, he said. Then you will be my wife. 3 weeks, Temperance agreed, her heart full. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Mrs. Callahan helped Temperance sew a wedding dress, a simple cream-colored gown that fit her perfectly. The other women at the boarding house pitched in, offering ribbons and lace from their own meager supplies. Mrs. Morrison sent word that she was arranging for a small reception after the ceremony at her home. Temperance saw Nathan whenever he could get away from the ranch, stolen hours that were never enough. They talked about everything, from the mundane details of daily life to their dreams for the future. Nathan wanted children someday, a house full of noise and laughter. Temperance wanted the same, a family built on love instead of obligation. The night before the wedding, Temperance could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed at the boarding house, staring at the ceiling, unable to believe how much her life had changed in 4 short months. She had gone from freezing to death in the snow to being on the brink of marriage to a man she loved deeply. It felt like a dream, like she would wake up and find herself back under that tree, alone and dying. But morning came, and it was real. Mrs. Callahan helped her dress, pinning wildflowers in her hair and fussing over every detail. When Temperance looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy, she realized. Truly happy for the first time in years. The church was small and simple, but it was full of people. The Morrisons were there, along with the ranch hands and their families. Mrs. Callahan sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even Sheriff Bridger had shown up, giving Temperance a rare smile. And then Nathan was there, standing at the altar in a new suit, his hair slicked back, his eyes locked on her. Temperance walked down the aisle on trembling legs, but with every step, her confidence grew. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The ceremony was brief. They exchanged vows, their voices steady and clear. Nathan slipped a simple gold band on her finger, and she did the same for him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her like they were the only two people in the world, and the church erupted in applause. The reception at the Morrison Ranch was lively and joyful. There was food and music and dancing, and for hours Temperance forgot about everything except the feel of her husband's hand in hers, the sound of his laugh, the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing on earth. As the sun set, Nathan pulled her aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Cooper?" The name sent a thrill through her. "Yes, I am ready." Nathan had prepared his cabin for her arrival. It was small, just one room with a loft, but it was clean and cozy. There were wildflowers on the table and fresh linens on the bed. Temperance looked around, tears pricking her eyes. "It is not much," Nathan said, sounding uncertain, "but it is ours, and when I save enough, we can build something bigger." "It is perfect," Temperance said firmly. "This is perfect." That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion. Nathan was gentle with her, patient, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. It was nothing like the horror stories she had heard whispered among women. It was beautiful and intimate, a joining not just of bodies, but of souls. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Nathan's hand stroking her hair. "I am the luckiest man alive," he murmured. "I cannot believe you are mine." "I am the lucky one," Temperance said. "You saved me, Nathan. In every way, a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Nathan corrected. "You gave me something to come home to, something to work for beyond just getting by. You gave me a reason." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, safe and warm and loved. Life as a ranch wife was harder than Temperance had anticipated, but she threw herself into it with determination. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to churn butter, to preserve vegetables for the winter. She tended a small garden behind the cabin and helped Nathan with the lighter ranch work, mending tack and feeding the chickens they had acquired. Nathan left before dawn most mornings and did not return until after dark, but he always greeted her with a kiss and asked about her day. They fell into a comfortable routine, and Temperance found a contentment she had never known before. This was her life now, simple and honest, and she loved it. Summer passed into fall, and Temperance realized she was pregnant. She told Nathan over dinner one evening in September, unable to keep the news to herself any longer. Nathan's face went through a series of emotions: shock, joy, fear, and finally an overwhelming tenderness. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I have missed my monthly courses for 2 months, and I have been sick every morning. Mrs. Morrison says those are the signs." Nathan came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Temperance asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy?" "Temperance, I am terrified and thrilled and more grateful than I can possibly express. You are giving me a family, something I never thought I would have. Of course I am happy." They told the Morrisons the next Sunday, and the news was met with celebration. Mrs. Morrison took Temperance aside and gave her advice about pregnancy and childbirth, practical and comforting. She promised to be there when the time came, to help with the delivery. The pregnancy was mostly easy, though Temperance was tired more often and her back ached constantly. Nathan was incredibly solicitous, doing more of the heavy work around the cabin and insisting she rest whenever possible. It was both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but Temperance knew it came from a place of love. Winter came early that year, and with it, a deep cold that reminded Temperance too much of the storm that had nearly killed her. Nathan noticed her anxiety and held her close on the worst nights, whispering reassurances until she could sleep. In late February, when the snow was still deep on the ground, Temperance went into labor. Nathan rode hard to fetch Mrs. Morrison, and the older woman arrived within the hour, calm and capable. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Temperance thought she might die from the pain, but every time she felt like giving up, she heard Nathan's voice outside the door, encouraging her, telling her she could do this. Finally, as the sun rose on a cold February morning, the baby was born. A son, healthy and squalling, with a shock of dark hair in his father's eyes. Mrs. Morrison cleaned the baby and placed him in Temperance's arms. "You did beautifully, dear. He is perfect." Nathan was allowed in then, and the look on his face when he saw his son was something Temperance would remember for the rest of her life. Pure, unfiltered love and wonder. "We have a boy," she said, her voice hoarse from screaming. "What should we name him?" Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his large hand gently touching the baby's tiny head. "I always liked the name Thomas, after my grandfather, the only family member who was ever kind to me." "Thomas Cooper," Temperance said, testing it out. "I like it. Tommy for short." "Tommy," Nathan repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our son." The next few months were exhausting and beautiful in equal measure. Tommy was a colicky baby, crying for hours on end, but he was also sweet and perfect, and both his parents were completely besotted. Nathan was a devoted father, getting up with Temperance in the night to help with feedings, walking the floor with Tommy when he would not settle. As spring arrived and Tommy grew stronger, the family settled into a new rhythm. Temperance wore the baby in a sling while she worked, and Nathan built a cradle that he kept by the door of the barn so Tommy could be near him while he did chores. One evening in early June, as they celebrated Tommy's 4-month birthday and their first wedding anniversary, Nathan made an announcement. "Mr. Morrison has offered me a promotion. He wants me to be his foreman, overseeing all the ranch hands. It comes with better pay and the option to build a house on Morrison land, something bigger than this cabin." Temperance looked around the little cabin that had been their first home. "This place has been good to us." "It has," Nathan agreed. "But we need more room, especially if we have more children. And the pay increase would mean we could save, maybe even buy our own land someday." "Then you should take it," Temperance said firmly. "This is a wonderful opportunity, Nathan. You have earned it." Nathan accepted the promotion, and by late summer, their new house was complete. It was modest but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a sitting room. Temperance cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by gratitude and love. They moved in on a warm September day, and that night, as they lay in their new bed with Tommy asleep in the next room, Nathan pulled Temperance close. "2 years ago, I was alone," he said quietly. "I had work and a roof over my head, but I was alone. Then I found you in that storm, and everything changed. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to build something instead of just surviving. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person." Temperance kissed him softly. "And I love you. You showed me that family is not about blood. It is about the people who choose to stand by you, who love you when you have nothing to offer but yourself. You are my family, Nathan. You and Tommy. You are everything." The years that followed were not always easy. There were harsh winters and dry summers, cattle that got sick and crops that failed. Temperance had 2 miscarriages that broke her heart, but Nathan was there for her through the grief, holding her while she cried and reminding her that they still had each other and Tommy. When Tommy was 4, Temperance gave birth to a daughter, a tiny thing with delicate features and her mother's dark eyes. They named her Sarah after Nathan's sister, and Nathan wept when he held her for the first time. "She would have loved to meet you," he whispered to the baby. "She would have been so proud to have you named after her." Sarah was an easy baby, content and quiet, the opposite of her colicky brother. Tommy was obsessed with his baby sister, always wanting to help, to hold her, to show her things. It made Temperance's heart swell to see her children together, to see the family they were building. 2 years after Sarah's birth, another son arrived, whom they named James. He was a big baby, healthy and loud, and the house was never quiet again. But it was a good noise, the sound of life and love and chaos. Mr. Morrison retired when Tommy was 8, and to everyone's surprise, he offered to sell the ranch to Nathan at a price he could afford, with payments spread over many years. It was a risk, taking on that much debt, but it was also an opportunity to own something, to build a legacy for their children. Nathan and Temperance talked long into the night, weighing the risks and benefits. Finally, they decided to do it. They would buy the ranch and make it their own. The next decade was filled with hard work and long days. Nathan managed the ranch with skill and dedication, and it prospered under his care. Temperance handled the business side, keeping the books and managing the finances. Together, they built something solid and lasting. Tommy grew into a capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Sarah was clever and bookish, always reading, always asking questions. James was the wild one, always getting into trouble but with a good heart underneath the mischief. On a warm evening in June, as Temperance sat on the porch watching the sun set over the land they now owned, Nathan came and sat beside her. They were in their 40s now, their faces lined with age and experience, but the love between them was as strong as ever. "Hard to believe it has been 20 years since I found you in that storm," Nathan said, taking her hand. 20 years, Temperance repeated, shaking her head in wonder. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times it feels like a whole lifetime." "It has been a good lifetime," Nathan said, "the best I could have hoped for." "We have been blessed," Temperance agreed. 3 beautiful children, a successful ranch, and each other. What more could we ask for? Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want you to know something. I know what your uncle did to you was terrible, and I know it left scars, but in a strange way, I am grateful. If he had not abandoned you, if you had not been in those woods that day, I never would have found you. We never would have had this life together. So while I will never forgive him for what he did, I can acknowledge that something good came from it." Temperance considered this. She had not thought about her uncle in years. The last she had heard, his store had failed, and he had moved away from Butte, disgraced and broken. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a distant, detached pity. "You are right," she said finally. "I would not change anything, not if it meant losing this. Losing you and the children and this life we have built. The pain was worth it because it led me here." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Inside the house, they could hear their children laughing, arguing over something trivial. It was the sound of home, of family, of everything they had fought so hard to create. Tommy was 19 now, courting a girl from town, the daughter of the blacksmith. Temperance suspected there would be a wedding before the year was out, and the thought filled her with joy. Sarah, at 15, was talking about becoming a teacher, and Nathan had promised to send her to the normal school in Helena if that was what she wanted. James, at 13, was still figuring out who he was, but he had time. "Do you think they understand how lucky they are?" Temperance asked. "To grow up with parents who love them, who love each other?" "Maybe not now," Nathan said. "But someday, when they have families of their own, they will understand. They will see what we built here and know it was done with love." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nathan stood and offered Temperance his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Cooper, let us go inside and be with our family." Temperance took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Together, they walked into their home, into the warmth and light and noise of their beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. 23 years after Nathan had found Temperance dying in a snowstorm, they celebrated their silver wedding anniversary. The whole community came out for the celebration, held at the ranch on a beautiful June day. Tommy was there with his wife and 2 small children, making Nathan and Temperance grandparents. Sarah had finished her teaching training and was about to start her first position at the school in Butte. James was working the ranch with his father. talking about maybe starting his own spread someday. As Temperance looked around at all the people who had come to celebrate with them, at the family they had created and the life they had built, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about the girl she had been, abandoned and dying, with no hope and no future. She thought about the man who had refused to let her die, who had scooped her up and carried her to safety, who had loved her fiercely and completely for more than 2 decades. Nathan found her in the crowd and made his way to her side. He looked distinguished now, his hair gray at the temples, his face weathered by years of working outdoors. But his eyes were the same, dark and intense and full of love. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said, pulling her close. "Happy anniversary," Temperance replied, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. They danced together as the sun set, surrounded by family and friends, surrounded by love. And Temperance knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The girl who had nearly died in the snow had become a woman who thrived in the life she and her cowboy had built together, a life full of purpose and meaning and endless love. Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows, as they always do. Nathan and Temperance grew older together, their bodies aging but their love never diminishing. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns, and personal losses. When Mr. Morrison passed away, they mourned him as they would a father. When Mrs. Callahan died, Temperance wept for the woman who had given her shelter when she had nothing. But there were triumphs too. Tommy expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land and increasing the herd. Sarah became the most respected teacher in Butte, known for her patience and dedication. James eventually did start his own spread, with Nathan's help and blessing, building it just over the ridge from the main ranch so the family could stay close. Grandchildren multiplied, and then great-grandchildren, filling the ranch with noise and laughter during holidays and special occasions. Nathan built a large table big enough to seat 20 people because family dinners had become raucous affairs that required space. On their 40th wedding anniversary, held on a warm June evening much like their first, Nathan and Temperance sat together on the porch of the house he had built for her all those years ago. They were in their 60s now, their bodies marked by time and hard work, but their hands were still linked, their love still strong. 40 years, Temperance said softly. "Can you believe it?" "Feels like both a lifetime and a moment," Nathan replied. "I have loved you for 40 years, and I would gladly love you for 40 more. You are stuck with me, Nathan Cooper. For better or worse, remember. Best decision I ever made, asking you to marry me. Best decision you ever made, saying yes." They watched as their family gathered on the lawn below, 3 generations strong, all stemming from a cowboy who had refused to pass by a dying woman in a snowstorm and a woman who had fought to survive against impossible odds. "I think about that day sometimes," Temperance said. "The day my uncle left me in the woods. I used to feel such anger about it, such betrayal. But now, all these years later, I can almost see it as a gift. A terrible, painful gift, but a gift nonetheless. Because it brought me you." "He is dead now, is he not?" Nathan asked. "Your uncle?" "Yes." Sarah found the notice in an old newspaper a few years back. He died alone in some boarding house in Wyoming. No family to mourn him, no one to remember him fondly. That is his legacy, loneliness and regret. "And this is ours," Nathan said, gesturing to the family below. Love and legacy and life. We won, Temperance. We took the worst thing that happened to both of us and turned it into something beautiful. As the evening deepened and the stars emerged, their family came up to the porch to say goodnight. Each child, grandchild, and great-grandchild hugged them, thanked them for the celebration, told them they loved them. When everyone had finally left or retired to bed, Nathan and Temperance sat alone in the quiet. "I am tired," Temperance admitted. "But it is a good tired, the tired that comes from a life well lived." I know what you mean, Nathan said. Come on, let me take you to bed. We have earned our rest. They went inside, moving slowly but together, the way they had done everything for 40 years. In their bedroom, Nathan helped Temperance with the buttons on her dress, his fingers still deft despite the arthritis. She helped him with his boots, a ritual they had performed thousands of times. In bed, they curled together the way they had on their wedding night, fitting together like two pieces of a puzzle. I love you, Temperance Cooper, Nathan whispered into the darkness. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Nathan Cooper. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. My rescuer, my husband, my home. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the life they had built, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73 on a cold January morning. Temperance woke to find him beside her, looking peaceful and pain-free for the first time in months. The cancer had been eating at him for a year, but he had refused to complain, had insisted on working the ranch until his body simply would not let him anymore. The funeral was enormous, with people coming from all over Montana to pay their respects. Nathan Cooper had been a good man, a fair employer, a loving husband and father. The preacher spoke of his integrity, his dedication, his love for his family. But it was Temperance's words that left not a dry eye in the church. Nathan saved my life twice, she said, her voice steady despite her grief. Once when he found me dying in a snowstorm, and again when he taught me how to live. He showed me that love is not just a feeling, but an action, a choice you make every single day. He chose me every day for 45 years, and I chose him. We built a life together that was richer and fuller than I ever could have imagined. And while my heart is broken now, I am grateful. Grateful for every moment, every laugh, every tear, every ordinary day we shared. He was my great love, and I was his. That is all that matters. Temperance lived another 12 years after Nathan's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She never remarried, never even considered it. She had already had her great love, and she needed no other. She spent her remaining years working in her garden, reading to her great-grandchildren and telling stories about the old days, about the wild Montana frontier and the cowboy who had saved her life. She made sure her grandchildren and great-grandchildren understood where they came from, the strength and love that had built their family. On a warm June evening, just after her 85th birthday, Temperance passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Nathan for so many years. Her family gathered to mourn her, but also to celebrate a life well lived, a love story that had become family legend. They buried her beside Nathan in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a tree they had planted together on their 10th anniversary. The headstone was simple, reading, Temperance Lawson Cooper, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She was found in a storm and became the foundation of a family. And beside it, Nathan's headstone. Nathan Cooper, beloved husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He found love in the snow and built an empire of family. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the Cooper family line, each generation adding to the legacy that Nathan and Temperance had started. The story of how they met, of the uncle who had abandoned a young woman in a snowstorm, and the cowboy who had refused to let her die, became family lore, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. Because some love stories are not just about two people finding each other. They are about what those two people build together, the family they create, the legacy they leave behind. Nathan and Temperance's story was one of survival and second chances, of choosing love even when life had given them every reason to give up. And in the end, that was the greatest testament to their love. Not just that they had found each other in the worst possible circumstances, but that they had taken that terrible moment and transformed it into something beautiful, something lasting, something that would echo through generations long after they were gone. Their great great grandchildren still work that ranch, still tell the story of their ancestors who met in a snowstorm and built an empire of love. And on cold winter nights, when the snow falls heavy and the wind howls through the Montana mountains, the family gathers close and remembers that sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually the beginning of something extraordinary. Sometimes being abandoned in the woods during a snowstorm is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is just the beginning. Sometimes the moment you think you are dying is actually the moment your real life begins. And sometimes the person who saves you becomes the person you cannot imagine living without. That was the legacy of Nathan and Temperance Cooper, a love born in tragedy, strengthened by adversity, and lasting long beyond death, a love that saved two broken people and gave them something neither had thought possible: a home, a family, a future. And that in the end was everything.